In this video, I'm going to go over the problems that are on your Unit 3 test review. So this first question says that a line contains the points 36, negative 70, and 45, negative 97. What is the slope of the line in simplified form? So remember, to calculate slope, given 2 points, I'm going to use the formula m equals y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So to figure this out, I'm going to start off by labeling my points. The first point I'm going to call x1, y1. The second point I'm going to call x2, y2. So when I plug into my formula, y2 is negative 97 minus y1, which is negative 70, and that's divided by x2, which is 45, minus x1, which is 36. So when we simplify this, we get negative 97 minus negative 70, which becomes plus. Negative 97 plus 70 is negative 27, and that's divided by 45 minus 36, which is 9. So negative 27 over 9 will simplify to negative 3. So the slope of the line in simplified form is m equals negative 3. So in the second question, it says, what are the x and y intercepts of the line described by the equation 6x minus 2y equals 27.6? So remember the x and y intercepts and where they occur. The x-intercept will occur when y equals 0. So the x-intercept will be at x, 0. The y-intercept will occur where x equals 0. So the y-intercept will be 0y. So let's go to our equation and plug in the values of x and y to figure out where the x and y intercepts are. So to figure out the x-intercept, I'm going to plug in 0 for y. So I get 6x minus 2 times 0 equals 27.6. So now let's simplify this. We have 6x minus 2 times 0, which is 0, and that equals 27.6. 6x minus 0 is 6x, and that equals 27.6. So now we're going to divide both sides by 6 to figure out the value of x. So when we divide both sides by 6, we get x equals 27.6 divided by 6, which is 4.6. So x equals 4.6 means that I have an x-intercept at 4.6, 0 on my line. So now let's find the y-intercept. The y-intercept is going to occur where x equals 0. So I'm going to go to my equation and plug in x equals 0. So I get 6 times 0 minus 2y equals 27.6. 6 times 0 is 0, so 0 minus 2y equals 27.6. 0 minus 2y is negative 2y, so that equals 27.6. So to solve for y, I'm going to divide both sides by negative 2. When I divide both sides by negative 2, I get y equals 27.6 divided by negative 2, which is negative 13.8. So y equals negative 13.8 means that I have a y-intercept at 0, negative 13.8. So now let's graph negative 4 over 5x plus 6. So this equation, y equals negative 4 over 5x plus 6, is in slope-intercept form. So we have our slope, which is m, of negative 4 over 5, and our y-intercept of b, which is 6. So that means my y-intercept will be at the point 0, 6. My m, which is negative 4 over 5, means that I'm going to calculate slope as down 4, right 5. 5x plus 6 using this graphing tool. So remember, the y-intercept is at 6, so we're going to go up to 6 and put our first point right there. We need to select 2 points on the line in order to be able to create our graph. So to create the second point, I'm going to use the slope, which is negative 4 over 5. So I'm going to count down 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'm going to go right 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm going to put my second point there. So when I click on the 2 points, it'll automatically create my line. So now for question 4. There's actually more than one way you can solve this problem, and I'm going to show you both ways. So this graph represents negative 4x plus y equals 5. Which ordered pair is in the solution set of negative 4x plus y is greater than or equal to 5? So notice what they've done here is they've graphed the line. Okay, so they've done half the problem for you, but they want to figure out which ordered pair is in the solution set. Remember, the solution set will be the shaded region. So what you can do is one way is find the test point. Remember, we like to use 0, 0 as our test point, and that will help you determine which region to shade. So if you plug in 0, 0, you get negative 4 times 0 plus 0 is greater than or equal to 5. So negative 4 times 0 is 0. 0 plus 0 is greater than or equal to 5. So that says that 0 is greater than or equal to 5. That is false. So I'm going to shade the part of the graph that is away from 0, 0, which is everything on this side of my line. So now what you can do is you can go through the points that are listed here and figure out which one is in the shaded region. So 5, 1 will be up here. That's not in the shaded region. Negative 1, 5 is up here. So that looks good. 5, negative 1 is down here, so will not be in the shaded region. And negative 1, negative 5 is down here, so that will not be in the shaded region. So it looks like B is the correct answer. The other way to solve this is to remember that a point that is in the solution set will make the inequality true. So you can plug in each of these values. So like if I plug in A, I get negative 4 times 5 plus 1 is greater than or equal to 5. So that means I'm saying negative 20 plus 1 is greater than or equal to 5, which is saying negative 19 is greater than or equal to 5. That is false, so A is not the correct answer. Remember, a solution will make the inequality true. If I plug in the answer choice B, I get negative 4 times negative 1 plus 5 is greater than or equal to 5. Negative 4 times negative 1 is 4, so I get 4 plus 5 is greater than or equal to 5. 4 plus 5 is 9, so I get 9 is greater than or equal to 5. And that is true, so that means that this ordered pair is probably my correct answer. But just to make sure, I'm going to show you C and D, so you can understand this process. So if I plug in C, I get negative 4 times 5 plus negative 1 is greater than or equal to 5. Negative 4 times 5 is negative 20. Get negative 20 plus 1 is greater than or equal to 5, which is saying negative 21 is greater than or equal to 5, which is false. Now for D. If I plug in negative 1, negative 5, I get negative 4 times negative 1 plus negative 5 is greater than or equal to 5. Negative 4 times negative 1 is 4. 4 plus negative 5 is greater than or equal to 5. 4 plus negative 5 is negative 1. Negative 1 is greater than or equal to 5 is false, so D is not the correct answer. So you can see either way, you'll find that B is the answer. That is the ordered pair that is in the solution. So in this problem, it says you're ordering salads and sandwiches for your annual family reunion. Salads cost $2.50 each, and sandwiches cost $3.99. You can spend up to $100 on food for the reunion. Let X represent the number of salads and let Y represent the number of sandwiches. Write an inequality that represents the situation. So let's look at the important facts. So we have salads at $2.50 each, sandwiches at $3.99. You can spend up to $100. X is the number of salads, Y is the number of sandwiches. And we're writing an inequality. Okay, so remember what inequality means. It means we're going to have a less than, greater than, less than or equal to, or a greater than or equal to. So one thing we can do in this problem is figure out what we're talking about. We're talking about the total cost, right? And then it tells us you can spend up to $100, okay? Let's think about what's going on when you have $100 to spend. So you can spend less than $100, right? That is allowed. You cannot spend more than $100, right? Because $100 is all you have. You can spend less than or equal to $100 because you can spend exactly $100, right? If you have $100, you can spend exactly $100, but you cannot spend more than $100. Okay, so that's why we're going to use the less than or equal to sign. So we're going to say cost is going to be less than or equal to 100. Well, our total cost is going to be salads and sandwiches. So the total of this has to be less than or equal to 100. Now let's figure out the prices of each. Salads are $2.50 each, so we have $2.50, and it tells us that we have X number of salads. So $2.50X plus sandwiches, which are $3.99. So $3.99 times Y, which is the number of sandwiches, has to be less than or equal to 100. And that is the inequality that represents the situation. So now let's graph the inequality. Y is greater than or equal to 4 minus 3x. So remember, we're going to start off with our slope-intercept form, right? Because we're going to start off by graphing a line, and we want to graph lines when they're in slope-intercept form. Well, we want our x term to be first. So this is kind of like slope-intercept, but the terms are kind of out of order, right? So we're going to put our mx term first. So whatever sign's in front of the term is going to stay with it. Okay, so that negative 3x is going to stay like a negative 3x. If you want to, you can think of this as being 4 plus negative 3x, and that is why I make my first term negative 3x, right? Because remember, subtracting is like adding the opposite. So then I have my b. So the 4 here is a positive 4, so I'm going to write plus 4. Okay, so all I did was rewrite the inequality as an equation so I can just graph it using slope-intercept form. So when I have it in slope-intercept form, remember this is going to be my value of b, which is my y-intercept at 0, 4. My slope, which is m, is negative 3. So m equals negative 3 is, remember, negative 3 over 1. So that means I'm going to go down 3 and I'm going to go right 1. So I'm going to start off with my y-intercept at 0, 4, which is right here. Then I'm going to go down 3, so down 1, 2, 3. Right 1. And that is my second point. Now I need to figure out what kind of line I need to connect these 2 points. Well, you see here I have my greater than or equal to sign. Remember that greater than or equal to is solid. So I am going to draw my line through these 2 points. And that is now my boundary line. But remember, there's 2 parts to the graph of an inequality, right? I have to have my boundary line and I need my shaded region. Okay, so the next step is going to be to figure out the shaded region. So the shading, I'm going to pick a test point. My favorite test point to pick is 0, 0, which I can do as long as it's not on the line. So I'm going to pick 0, 0 and plug into my equation. So I have 0 is greater than or equal to 4 minus 3 times 0. So this tells me that 0 is greater than or equal to 4 minus 3 times 0, which is 0. 0 is greater than or equal to 4 minus 0, which is 4. That is false, right? Because 0 is less than 4. So I'm going to shade the side of this line that is away from 0, 0. So this is now the graph of my inequality. So this problem says that the graph shows the profit Y of a fundraiser barbecue with respect to the number of brisket sandwiches sold, X. Use the graph to complete each statement. So the y-intercept is. So in this problem, you can see here the y-intercept occurs at 0, negative 400. So 0 is my value of x, negative 400 is my value of y. I can figure out this is the y-intercept because this is where my graph crosses the y-axis. So since this is a word problem, for x and y, I have a certain meaning, right? It tells me x is the number of sandwiches and y is the profit, okay? So this x is telling me sandwiches, and then the y is the profit. So that means when I sell 0 sandwiches, right? So before I start selling any sandwiches, my profit is negative 400. Okay, so you may be wondering, what does it mean? Why would I start off with a profit of negative 400? Well, if I don't sell any sandwiches, I'm not making any money, right? And I would have negative 400 because think about it, you can't just make sandwiches, right? You have to buy the bread and you have to buy the brisket and all of that. So that's why it starts off at negative 400 because you're starting off at a loss and then you're going to move up as you sell more and more sandwiches. So that's what this y-intercept is telling you. So now for question 8, let's graph y equals negative 4x plus 1. So y equals negative 4x plus 1 is in slope-intercept form, right? It is in y equals mx plus b form. My value of b is 1, so my y-intercept will be at 0, 1. My m is negative 4. M equals negative 4 tells me that I'm going to count slope as negative 4 over 1, because remember, we can put whole numbers over 1. So negative 4 tells me I'm going to go down 4. 1 tells me I'm going to go right 1. So it's y equals negative 4x plus 1. So I'm going to go to 1 and put my first point there because that is the y-intercept of my line. Then from 1, I have a slope of negative 4. So I'm going to count down 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then right 1 to here to create my second point. So remember, when I click on the second point, it'll automatically create the graph of my line. So now let's do number 9. Let's graph negative 4x plus y equals negative 3. Well, let's look at this equation. Is it in y equals mx plus b form? Not really, right? Because remember, in y equals mx plus b form, y is going to be by itself on one side of the equation. But that's okay. We can do a little bit of rearranging and get this equation into y equals mx plus b form. I'm just going to move away this negative 4x term, which I can do by adding 4x to both sides. So I'm going to add 4x to both sides. And then on the left, this cancels and I have y equals 4x minus 3. So that tells me now that I have an m value of 4 and a b value of negative 3. b negative 3 means that I have my y-intercept at 0, negative 3. M at 4 tells me that m equals 4, which I can write as 4 over 1. So to count slope, I'm going to go up 4 and right 1. Equals 4x minus 3. Remember that 4x minus 3 will have a y-intercept at negative 3. So I'm going to go to negative 3 and create my first point right there. Now I need to count the slope, which is 4. So remember, 4 is 4 over 1. So I'm going to count up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then right 1 in order to create my second point. These 2 points will create the graph of my line. So now let's do number 10. Let's write the equation of the line through 2, negative 6, and 4, 8 in slope-intercept form. So I want to write everything in slope-intercept form, which remember is y equals mx plus b. So to write something in y equals mx plus b form, I need a value of m and a value of b. So first, let's start off by figuring out m. So I have 2 points. So remember, I'm going to need to use that formula that m equals y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. When I use this formula, I'm always going to start off by labeling my points. This point will be x1, y1, and the second point will be x2, y2. So this tells me that my y2 is 8. I have 8 minus y1, which is negative 6, over x2, which is 4, minus x1, which is 2. So now let's simplify this. 8 minus negative 6 is going to be 8 plus 6, which is 14, over 4 minus 2, which is 2. 14 over 2 is 7, so 7 equals the value of m. Now I need to figure out the value of b. So remember, I can pick one of my points. I'm going to pick the point 4, 8. And that is going to give me an x value and a y value that I can now plug into y equals mx plus b. So remember, I have a value of m, value of y, and value of x, and I can solve for b. So let's plug everything in. Y is 8, m is 7, x is 4, and I have plus b. So let's simplify. We get 8 equals 7 times 4, which is 28, plus b. So now to get b by itself, I'm going to subtract 28 from both sides. So when I do that, on the left, I get 8 minus 28, which is negative 20. And then 28 and minus 28 cancel, so I have negative 20 equals b. So I have m and I have b. I can now write the equation of my line in slope-intercept form. I'm going to plug in these values, so I have y equals 7x plus negative 20. That plus negative I'm going to rewrite as a subtraction, so I have y equals 7x minus 20, and that is now the equation. So now let's try problem 11. It says this table represents some points on the graph of a linear function. What is the rate of change of y with respect to x for this function? So if we look at here, we can see that we have this key phrase, the rate of change of y with respect to x. So remember, that is basically asking us for the slope. And remember, when we need to calculate the slope, we have this formula, m equals y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So when we use this formula, we need to label 2 points so that we can use them to calculate the slope. So you can pick any 2 points you have in this chart. I'm going to pick these last 2 points. So I'm going to call this x1, y1, and I'm going to call the second point x2, y2. So now let's plug into our formula. We have m equals y2, which is 1, minus y1, which is 10, over x2, which is 0, minus x1, which is negative 2. So now when we simplify this, we get 1 minus 10, which is negative 9. That's over 0 minus negative 2, which is basically 0 plus 2. So we have negative 9 over 2, and that is the value of the rate of change. That is our value of slope, so that is the rate of change of y with respect to x for this function. So now let's do problem 12. It says that Anna's weekly paycheck varies directly with the number of hours she works at the local pet store. Her total paycheck is $35 when she works 4 hours. Find the amount of her paycheck when she works 12 hours. So we have this very important phrase right here, varies directly. So remember, that is what tells us we are going to use y equals kx. So we have weekly paycheck equals k times the number of hours she works. So in this problem, it doesn't give us variables, so we can just make up our own. So we can call the weekly paycheck, let's call that P. And so P equals K times the number of hours, which is H. So now we were given a situation, $35 when she works 4 hours. Remember, we can use that to figure out the value of K. So we have 35 equals K times the number of hours, which is 4. So now to figure out the value of K, we can divide both sides by 4. So 35 divided by 4 is going to give us $8.75. And that is our value of K, because that is how much she makes per hour. So now we need to find the amount when she works 12 hours. So we have this equation now, right? We can substitute in K and we can say P equals 875 times H. So we can plug in this value of 12 hours for H and solve to find the value of P. So her paycheck will equal $8.75 times 12. So that means that P equals 875 times 12, which is 105. So that means her total paycheck will be $105.